Well, good morning to members of the media. Good morning to listeners and viewers on GDTV Live, on Facebook Live, and on the various social media platforms. This morning, we have convened this press conference to deal with a number of issues that are currently affecting the people of St. Lucia in ways that we cannot imagine as a country. We are here today to decry the spiraling rate of crime. We are here today to decry the rising cost of living with a very apparent lack of solutions by the current regime. We are here today to decry the lack of implementation of the e-book system, which would have ameliorated the high cost of school books that our people would have faced at this present time. We are here today to decry the flip-flopping that has characterized the first year of this regime. We are here today to decry what is a national crisis that is afflicting the people of this country in every walks of life. And so, my friends, what we are facing in St. Lucia is a precarious situation, a difficult situation, where many families are finding it very difficult to get by. Now, the United Workers' Party wants to place on record that we do agree with suggestions that the inflation problem which we are facing at this present time is a global inflation problem. And many countries are being afflicted by the inflation situation, which is wreaking havoc across the globe. But what we take issue with is the manner in which this administration is managing the inflation issue. The inconsistency, the lack of resolve, the lack of leadership, the lack of decisiveness. You would recall, friends in the media, that when this problem started out, that the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister of our country said that inflation was imported and that there was nothing that he could do about the rising cost of household commodities like ramen, like tuna fish. We look at the price of gas for commuters, very expensive. We look at the bus fares in St. Lucia. St. Lucia is among one of the only countries in the Eastern Caribbean that has allowed the bus fares to go up on its people. And so we have to ask ourselves, a government that has run on putting people first, a government that has run on a platform of championing the cause of ordinary citizens, is now dealing with these important issues in such a cavalier manner. So we see now that after many years and after many efforts by many governments in St. Lucia to continue to subsidize the bus fares in this country, because there is an appreciation for the sensitivity of this matter and the impact that it would have on the most vulnerable of citizens across the spectrum of our country. And so allowing the bus fares to go up, albeit by $1, is having untold damages on the people of St. Lucia. We look at the price of LPG gas. A few months ago, it was less than $30. A 22-pound cylinder today is $40 odd. Now you tell me if this situation is tenable. You tell me if the people of St. Lucia are able to deal with the rising cost of living without any impactful and decisive government assistance. Prime Minister and other members of cabinet have said that they have given subsidy. But the subsidies are nothing new. Every administration for the last 20 to 30 given subsidy, have chosen to subsidize gas. They have chosen to try to stabilize the price of gas so that they would cushion the effects of any increases or any shocks that we have had. We've been through the COVID pandemic, and at the height of the pandemic, with less revenue coming in, the United Workers' Party administration, we decided that we were going to continue to stabilize the price of gas to make sure that we don't pass on this to commuters and to bus drivers who in effect would pass this on to general consumers. And so basically what we are seeing here by this administration is an absolute betrayal of the population in the manner that they have chosen to deal with the inflation issue. When we compare that to how other Caribbean countries have dealt with it, we see in Jamaica they have instituted an electricity support program. We see in St. Kitts they have removed VAT on certain household commodities. We see in Barbados they have actually decided that they will continue to increase the subsidy, because what is needed now is not to say that you're subsidizing, but what is needed now is to say that we need to subsidize even at a higher price, at a higher level than we have before, because of the crisis that the world is facing at this present time. And so really we give the government of St. Lucia an F grade for the manner in which they have dealt with this inflation problem. And so this problem is compounded now on everyday citizens by the cost of school books, which is affecting our population. It means that when we look at what is taking place at this present time, people are going out to buy books for their children. And it saddens me that this administration discontinued the e-books program which the United Workers' Party instituted. That program was aimed at reducing the cost of school books on the citizens of this country. Many of them single mothers who are having sometimes to buy school books for as many as 4 or 5 children in certain households. And so without requisite support, without a mechanism that would have reduced the price of school books and supplying a very important asset for students in this country to educate themselves, this government has failed again. What they have done instead is to continue their laptop program. And by continuing their laptop program, what they sought to do is to have their laptop program so they can say that this is a St. Lucia Labour Party thing. Now, we cannot have politics to determine the policies of this country. I mean, the elections are over. The St. Lucia Labour Party, they have won. The United Workers' Party, we have conceded defeat. Stop the campaigning. Stop the politicization of very important policy prescriptions which we need to implement so that we can bring about assistance, we can bring about opportunity, and we can bring about an easing of the pain which is so badly required by the people of St. Lucia at this time. And so now, whereby students would have had the opportunity to have the e-books program implemented and to reduce significantly the cost of school books, we see that this government has gone in reverse. They have implemented the same old policies that have not worked. And so it saddens me today to see that the students of this country, now as we are in the month of August, you see, going around cash streets, many parents are having to deal with that struggle of the untenable rise in the cost of school books. And this is happening at a time when the country is going through global inflation. This is at a time when household goods in supermarkets are going up sky high. Now, the only thing that is not raising at a pace that is acceptable, that is the whole issue of people's pay, salaries and wages are staying stagnant while we see that the price of commodities are going up. And so therefore there has been a devaluation of the value of people's dollar because this inflation has gone up by significant rates. And if it is allowed without requisite support, without the expansion of zero-rated items or items that does not attract VAT, then what it does is that it clearly will have significant pressures on the people of St. Lucia. We watch with horror that while all of this is going on, that the government flirted with the idea of raising the VAT, of raising value-added tax. Imagine a government minister on his talk show suggested that it was a mistake by the United Workers' Party administration to reduce the VAT rate from 15 to 12.5%. 2 percentage points, but a 16% decline. We did so because there was an insensitivity in having the VAT rate at 15%. We saw the results that when this happened, how it affected the people of St. Lucia, how it affected small businesses, how it affected jobs, how it affected the price of goods in our supermarket. And so to flirt with the idea when supermarket prices are going sky high really tells me that this government is out of touch with the realities of what is taking place on the ground in this country. So I'm very happy that after pressures on Facebook and after pressures by members of the public, after many members of the public decrying the issue, that it appears now that the government is backtracking away from any potential increase in the value-added tax. We warned them that this was a significant mistake. We said so, that by reducing the VAT and allowing more money in people's pocket was obviously the way to go. But when we reduced VAT, it wasn't only about the consumer prices. It was about trying to grow the economy. It was about trying to create a framework whereby we can party presided over the halls of government. We were told by the then opposition that $500 was not enough and that we needed to have 1,005. It was promised by the then opposition. We don't only have the recovery of COVID now, but compounding that problem, we have a global inflation problem, which is wreaking havoc and untold damages on the people of St. Lucia. And so as a result, what we need to see is that we need to see that this insensitivity, this issue that is having untold damages on the people, that this is addressed and addressed in a manner. And so we didn't talk about income support. We ensure that 11,000 people in St. Lucia benefited from an income support program through the NIC. All NIC contributors were able to receive money once you would have lost your job. Then we had another 6,000 individuals who went on and got income support even though they were not registered. These are vendors, these are taxi drivers, these are small business people, these are hairdressers, and a number of people from a number of different sectors were able to get the support that is required so that they can advance and they can the perilous cost of living issues that the value-added tax no doubt had on the people of St. Lucia. And so, my friends, We're calling on the administration now to keep its promises, to ensure that while they're dealing with this inflation problem, to take a page from the other Caribbean countries and to a number of issues that are not covered by value-added tax so that we can see a further reduction in the price of goods. And where they cannot increase the taxes, they should also find a way to, as well, give income support to those people who need it. Now, other Caribbean countries have really shown St. Lucia and put us in the light with how they have dealt with it, with how they have gone out and they have understood that their citizens cannot continue to feel the pinch of the issues that are affecting them in this global global inflation situation. And so I want to conclude again exactly where I started. And that is that the people of St. Lucia remain nervous about the spiraling crime situation. Mr. Prime Minister, the people of St. Lucia are suffering under the wrath of the rising prices of household goods in St. Lucia. Mr. Prime Minister, it was a fundamental error on the part of your administration to not continue the e-books program that the United Workers' Party administration conceived, so that we would have been able to cushion the blow that many families are feeling at this time as it relates to the whole question of rising cost of school books, compounded by an already untenable global situation. Mr. Prime Minister, the issue of the passports, of which your government continues to shirk from responsibility, it is not only irresponsible, it is not only passing the buck, but it is downright weak to suggest to the people that the $250 an ounce for the price of the new e-passport, that is something that the United Workers' Party conceived, and so you are just implementing it. The fundamental message that we want to leave you with here today is that you need to take charge. A memo and a proposal came before the Cabinet of Ministers as it relates to how do we now move away from the readable passport system to that of a digital passport mechanism. What you had to do is that if you thought that the 250 proposed by the technocrats, you are now 12 months into government, you ought to say to those technocrats that you believe that $250 is too high for the people of St. Lucia. But further to that, we want to let you know that we are not impressed by your whole management of the situation. You have robbed the people of St. Lucia of their fundamental right to get a document that the Constitution affords them by holding the highest office in this country, the office of citizenship. And so when citizens are told that they should not apply for a document which is their constitutional right to do so because you are incompetent to manage a very easy situation, that means and that tells me that you are not ready to govern this country. And so, Mr. Prime Minister, on behalf of the citizens of this country, we ask you to lead. We ask you to stop the blaming. It's been a whole year that the United Workers' Party, led by Alan Shastney, is not in power. You are holding the reins of power, and you have the independence, you have the autonomy and the authority to be able to make decisions in the best interest of the people of St. Lucia. If I had to go by how you have managed the state of play so far, my conclusion is that simply you are not ready for the job. I thank you, and I want to introduce to the viewers of St. Lucia and the press conference here this morning, Honorable Alan Chasney, who is the leader of the opposition in the lower house and also the leader of this wonderful organization that we are part of, the United Workers' Party. I give you Honorable Alan Chasney.
Again, I want to say good morning to everyone, and Dominic, thank you very, very much for holding on and expressing so eloquently and so correctly some of the ills that are taking place in this country and some of the misfortunes. But as you said in your concluding remarks, that all of this is affirmation that when they were beating pans, they never had plans. The government doesn't have a plan. Up to today, a year into government, they don't have a plan. Now, you can say you can't plan for a recession, you can't plan for the supply chain issues, but you have to have a plan. And we're seeing time and time again that that's not the case. And yesterday in the House was a great example of what the government was attempting to do, which is to deflect, to try to raise issues and bring up concerns and make all kinds of aspersions against people and against institutions of this country. And we went to the House to debate a very important bill, a special prosecutor's bill. And what was alarming to me is that that bill had laid for its first reading for over a month. And where was civil society? Now, I'm hoping that society was having direct conversations with the government about some of the concerns that we brought up in the bill yesterday. And let me repeat those. Ernest Hilaire brought up what he in his mind spoke of political victimization, and spoke about the pain that it caused him, the embarrassment that it caused him. And the reality is that political victimization is something that has been in existence in our society and in multiple societies around the world. And it's something that we need to do to stamp it out as much as possible. So when you're going to pass a bill to enact a person to have the same powers and authorities of a prosecutor, the DPP, which is a constitutionally established position. How do you do that? Now, the fact is that they have 2/3 majority. If they wanted to, they could have gone and amended the Constitution to accommodate it. They also said themselves that they were influenced by the bill and the act that exists in Jamaica and the act that exists in Australia. So we don't have to look far. And Jamaica's act is a very good example because it's evolved. It started off as a corruption act. And after many years of being in existence, they have made amendments to it in hopes of perfecting some of the feelings that they had. And what they did is they created an entity that was the Integrity Commission, parts of the Financial Act in terms of anti-corruption mechanisms, and put them into one organization. And that organization has 3 departments. It has an administrative department that keeps all the paperwork in check and making sure that people are doing things the right way. It has an investigation department that investigates complaints. And it has a department for prosecutions. And the act in itself says that there shall never be a case in which the investigators are going to become the prosecutors, or the prosecutors are going to become the investigators. And even before deciding whether a case should be prosecuted, the prosecuting department and the administrator meet with the DPP in Jamaica to determine whether in fact it meets the threshold. Now, I was at pains yesterday to be able to explain the importance to all of us of what I'm speaking about. The act that they have written gives the the special prosecutor, the authority to investigate and then to determine whether it should be prosecuted. Not even the DPP does that. The investigations are done by the police, the investigations are done by customs, the investigations are done by special commissions. But the responsibility of the DPP is not only to prosecute the case, but is to determine that it meets the thresholds so it can be prosecuted, meaning that the facts are there, that when he goes to court, that he has the best chance of winning. Because once you make an allegation through prosecution against anybody, there's going to be reputational damage. And as I said in the House yesterday, politicians are accustomed to that kind of combative environment, of all kinds of allegations being made against each other. We saw how they attempted to say, well, not all politicians are the same, but the fact is all politicians are being branded the same. So I'm concerned about the public servants. That another way of being able to move a person who is in permanent establishment is by damaging those persons' reputation. And if you have a prosecutor in which it is questionable as to who that prosecutor is accountable to, we have a problem. What is important is how the DPP can be fired. No one person can fire a DPP. In the case of St. Lucia, a complaint must be made to the Governor General. And if the Governor General, on the advice of the Judiciary Council, believes that there is enough evidence to suggest that it should be investigated, an independent tribunal is appointed. We also have a case where the DPP is appointed by the Governor General. In the case now of the special prosecutor, it's just a judiciary committee that makes a decision whether that he should be removed or not. And instead of having to be appointed by the Governor General, he's being appointed by the Attorney General. We all know the Attorney Generals are political animals. I don't mean an animal in a literary sense. The nature of an Attorney General is they're political. How do I know that? Well, when there's a change in government, there's a change in the Attorney General. They tell you that the only way that you can form a cabinet in this country is you have a Prime Minister and an Attorney General. Our voices are too quiet on this critical issue. And this is a fundamental change of where we have now gone and acquiesced to the development, the establishment of an entity that can play political mischievous, that can influence the power in this country. And I ask the question, if you are limited on resources, why would you want to establish a parallel institution? Bradley has made that point over and over again. You create a youth economy to what? To lend money? You already have the St. Lucia Development Bank. You already have commercial banks. Why on earth would you have to go now and pay money to replicate what you're already doing? To what? A bank that you're going to create to issue $10 million, but it's not even $10 million. Because the operating cost of this institution is $5 million a year. That's why you have to pick sense from nonsense. Now, Ernest brought up the issue in the House. And he used the example of the Rovergate case to talk about political victimization. But he avoided speaking the truth. He didn't give the full details. There was no political victimization against Ernest for his car. What transpired in Rovergate is the classic example of what the act that we passed yesterday is to try to stop. Read it. It is to prevent public officers from abusing their office to benefit themselves or family members. That's what it said. So let's look at it. When Ernest Hilaire applied to the British government to get duty-free exemptions, which he was entitled to, he wrote a letter. He said that the car belonged to him. The car was registered in his name. The commercial invoice was in his name. Because remember, when he wrote the letter, he's writing the letter on St. Lucia government's letterhead as High Commissioner. But when he wrote that letter, he lied. Because he was declaring the car was in his name, but the money to purchase the car came from his brother, Paul. And he knew that. He knew at the time of application that the car belonged to his brother. So when he wrote the letter to the British government, he lied and said the car belonged to him. And as I say, the irony in all of that, Paul Hillier at the time was the head, the permanent secretary of a regional organization for customs regulations. His job was to go out and train customs officers on how to avoid being defrauded. And here it is that he colluded with his brother and used the office of the High Commission and the government of St. Lucia to defraud the UK government. Now, after buying the car in his name for his brother and realizing that he could not get a second car in his name and get the same benefit, he decided to put the car in the name of Tafao Williams. And he went as far as transferring the money into Tafao Williams' account. And his justification for that was to say that he was traveling and that he needed Tafao Williams to administer the purchase of the car. Now, anybody in St. Lucia who's purchased a car overseas knows that that's ridiculous. To be able to pay the money to the dealer, you can do a wire transfer, you can do your credit card, you can do it online. There's no need for that. So again, when he wrote the letter to the British government saying the car belonged to Tafao Williams, he lied. He knew, he said it. My car, I paid for it. I put the money into Tafao Williams. But remember, he wrote a letter to the British government saying to the British government that the car belonged to Tafao Williams. He was then informed that Tafao Williams did not qualify to get the car duty-free. And so I can imagine in a panic, what did he do? He put the car in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission. How do we know that? It's a public letter. A letter from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the UK that says, further to our conversation today, that you all made a mistake and the car does not belong to Tafao Williams, but the car belongs to the embassy, the High Commission. It goes on to say, to avoid any confusion, when you put the application in and it says owner of the vehicle, put St. Lucia High Commission. So again, Ernest lied. He lied. He told the British government the car belonged to the High Commission. Now understand that once you now are dealing with the state and it becomes a state asset, it falls under the Financial Act of St. Lucia. It's not an individual who can say, okay, you give me the car today and I'll give you back the car tomorrow. Did Ernest apply or request permission from his permanent secretary, the ministers, the government of St. Lucia, or anybody to put the car in the name of the High Commission? The answer is no. He abused his office in the UK. He made that decision himself in order to benefit himself, to save 12.5% in taxes. So he lied. And when the staff member at the High Commission office received the vehicle, because the vehicle was delivered to the High Commission, because it belonged to the High Commission. Range Rover has provided an affidavit to say when they sold the car, they understood they were selling the car to the St. Lucia High Commission. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the UK has said that the car belongs to the St. Lucia High Commission. So how does the investigation start? The audit department asked all offices overseas, which is a regular thing they do, to provide an inventory of all of their assets. When the High Commission office indicated that there is documents here that show that there was a car registered in the name of the High Commission, but the car was exported back to St. Lucia. That's what they reported. And the Cabinet Secretary, in receiving the letter from the High Commission, sent it to the Ministry of Finance. Why? The Ministry of Finance is the custodian of the assets of the state. They run the registry. Buildings, equipment, cars, everything, that's where it's all registered. And when the Director of Finance, the Ministry of Finance checked, there was no record of the vehicle being registered as an asset of the state. And there was no record of permission being sought or given to dispose of the vehicle. So they wrote to Customs and said, we understand that this car came in. There's evidence to show that this car may belong to the state. We understand the car has come in the name of Ernest Hilaire. Can you please confirm who owns the vehicle? When Customs checked it out, found out the car did come in St. Lucia. There was a declaration where it said that it was belonging to Ernest, but it was delivered on a pre-delivery. And 2 years had gone by and the pre-delivery had not been perfected. And that is the time when now Customs asked Ernest Hilaire for a very simple thing. Sir, can you provide the commercial invoice or evidence that you own the car? And after he played cat and mouse for the longest time, Customs finally said to him, sir, we know that the car was registered in the name of the High Commission. What you need to provide is, did you have permission to do that? And how did the asset go from the High Commission's name to you? Why? Because the Financial Act says that if the state is going to dispose of an asset that it owns, if the asset is less than $10,000, it has to be auctioned. So it's impossible for him to have received the permission. So here is a classic example with all the evidence that everybody needs to have. If we're also concerned about corruption in our country, where a public officer who was a former permanent secretary, so it means he knows the rules. We heard about the pedigree of his education yesterday. He knows better. Used his position to benefit himself and to benefit family members directly. All the evidence is there. The other thing that happened was while he was the High Commissioner, we had the fiasco of Jufali. We all know the truth now. Jufali became the IMO ambassador simply to get immunity from his divorce. And all the evidence is there to show that. And Ernest is the person who introduced Jufali to the government of St. Lucia. He is the one who requested that he become the ambassador. We also know that there was a joint account opened up between Ernest Hilaire and Jufali. Ernest Hilaire as the High Commissioner and Jufali as the ambassador. We know that Jufali transferred £66,500 into your account. the audit department, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Accountant General all confirmed no permission was given to open up the account, and no request was made to open up the account, which is a rule, a law by the Ministry of Finance, that anybody opening up an account in the name of the government of St. Lucia must get permission from the Accountant General to do so. More importantly, after you open the account, you must tell the Accountant General money is being transferred into the account. And you don't get permission to just spend the money yourself. You must get permission from the Director of Finance to spend the money. None of those things happened. And so what I said yesterday is that we have the laws. We know all these things are wrong. What we've lacked is the ability of an independent source to investigate, and we already have an independent source to prosecute. So this special prosecutor, in my mind, should not be a special prosecutor. He should be a special investigator. And if he wants to, he can investigate all he wants. And when he thinks he has enough evidence, bring it to the DPP to prosecute. And if the DPP says, I can prosecute it, but I lack resources, that is where the Minister of Finance can say, I will make a special allocation to you in order for you to be able to prosecute these cases. But is this government serious about corruption? You have a gentleman in their cabinet who used to be a member of our party. And when he was with our party leading up to the 2011 election, very famous day in our time, the U.S. government removed his visa. The then Labour government said that he's not fit to hold a cabinet post. But if the U.S. government took away the visa, there must be a good reason why they took it away. And until his name can be cleared, he should not run. Members of the United Party, when it came to the elections, agreed. And it was agreed that he would not run. The same Stevenson King, his wishes, and brought Richard back to run. In fact, it was at the launching of Andy Daniel in Dennery, that's the first time many of us found out. And you had a choice, walk off the stage or suck it up and support your party, which we did. Richard won his seat. Richard, now that we're in opposition, can you explain to us why and how you lost your visa? He said that's not for him to do. And he took a very defiant tone. Some people want to know why Steve was removed as leader of the United Workers' Party. It's because the clear things that were required to change the party, he was not doing. There were not like-minded people in the party who then got together, created a team, and we placed him as the political leader in a democratic way through a convention. And at no point going to derogate or undermine Steve. Steve had done too much for the party. But reality was we realized that Steve was not going to make the changes in the party that we needed. Time. The WikiLeaks was put public. What was WikiLeaks? Was a leak of information that was done globally. And in that report we saw that the U.S. government was perturbed at the fact that after, well, first of all, when we came into government in 2006, actually 2006, that St. Lucia was embracing a person that, in their words, was a notorious. In their words, not mine, their words. violent opposition, information came out where Richard's daughter, who was a U.S. citizen, applied for the reinstatement of his visa. And a copy of the response by the U.S. government was made public. And the U.S. government quoted a section of the act which deals with money laundering and illegal activities. And went on further in the letter to say that it's permanently revoked. So here it is that we have evidence on Ernest Hilaire. Here it is we have evidence that there's something suspicious about Richard. You have the minister's account, which I'll get into. You have a person that was involved in a pension fund scheme in the UK. We just saw that Mr. Ames, who was the head of Harlequin, just got convicted. Well, Freedom Bay, same system, same pension fund monies. And the head of Freedom Bay in St. Lucia was Wayne Gerard. I'm not telling you that there's something wrong, but there's enough there to investigate. And you put him in which ministry? Both Richard and Wayne in the ministry, the Prime Minister's ministry. In the case of Sean, I've said to Sean, there was never a chance that Sean would go to jail. The issue there was a statutory body, which was the lottery, acquiesced its responsibilities, its fiduciary responsibilities on the monies by creating a separate account and giving the minister the authority to determine what projects to fund and who would do the projects. So when I hear these stories, people talking about how much money was spent leading up to the elections, we had a crisis. We had COVID. The economy was crumbling. We pushed as much construction because there was no other sector that we could have focused on to create jobs and put money in people's pockets. But you want to equate that to what they did in 2016? Where the same lottery money, $7 million, was used to do projects in the last 8 months leading up to the elections. People who were candidates, Joachim Henry, other people, were given contracts to do construction jobs. I mean, the project in Marigot has been discussed ad nauseum, but are we making the connection that that money came from the lottery? The decision to do that project was the ministers, and the decision as to who the contractor was the ministers. And there was no proper oversight, because when you talk about spending $500,000 plus on building a bathroom, there's something wrong. You cannot tell me that you're serious about corruption, because it must start with you first. I'm not saying that if, in fact, there are guilty people in United Workers' Party or anywhere else, that they should not be. But if you want the people of St. Lucia to take you seriously and to understand you're going to be independent, start within. I heard Richard Frederick talk yesterday about, I used my office to come after him to have him put into jail. What nonsense. What stupidity. How arrogant can a person be? I have 3 court cases against Richard. And every time that there was an attempt and where he said other derogatory things, I finally asked the courts to put a gag order. I said, in the absence of hearing the case, it cannot be that he can continue to say these things with impunity. A gag order was put on. He broke that gag order, which means that he was in contempt of court, which is a criminal offense, because the court ordered you not to say anything. The judge, in her wisdom, said that she was not satisfied that Richard truly understood the complexity and the extent of the gag order. because we had done it during COVID and we were doing it online. And he wasn't physically present in the court, but his lawyer was liaising with him. So the judge said, I want you to go back and dot the I's and cross the T's, and make a greater declaration of a gag order, and that he must sign it. And she made sure that he was present when he signed it, and asked him on TV, do you understand? Said yes. Weeks later, he made another derogatory remark. Now, when we signed the gag order said that he could not make any derogatory remarks about me, period. So we went and we complained again, and we charged him with contempt. The judge, again, in her wisdom, said, oh, that was not contemplated in the gag order. And therefore, that's a new complaint, and I would have to refile. Now, there's something wrong. I have 3 defamation cases against me that date back now 4 years. And none of the cases have been resolved. How am I supposed to respond? I chose, and people have criticized me, and maybe they're right in hindsight, that I should have stood up to Richard. That every time he said something, I should have equally stood up in front of you and said all those things are wrong. I felt that that wasn't the way to solve it, because it becomes 2 politicians just yelling back and forth at each other. And all of a sudden now I'm part of that scheme. And I went to what I'm supposed to have. Justice. You want to say that I favored the DSH project because I owned land in Viewport? 1 acre of land that my family, 4 members of my family share, that we bought since 2013, and you want to suggest that I knew Joaquim, what's his name, Akeem, what's his name again, from DSH, Teo King. I knew Teo King all the way back in 2013. What magie. What nonsense. And I say the arrogance because for a man to say that and to believe that there are people who believe it, but he's proven me wrong. That there are people who believe that nonsense. Their own admission, they were the ones who started the negotiations with DSH. They're the ones who identified the location at Beaujeu, was it at Beauséjour? So, I am not frustrated. I am not disappointed. I'm not angry. I have no revenge in my heart. I consistently want to see solution to better. I'm on record. If this government does good things, I'm going to support it. If they build the airport better than we were going to build it, I applaud them. If they're going to build St. Jude's Hospital better than we were going to do, I applaud them. If they find a way to build better roads at a cheaper cost, I applaud them. If they're going to put water, if we're going to build sporting facilities, if we're going to continue to build the success of what we saw with the Commonwealth Games, where a young Julian Alfred would not have to go to Jamaica to train. That's the day we become successful. That's what makes the Aquatic Center so special. And to emulate the success of the Aquatic Center throughout the length and breadth of this country, about creating a healthcare system that provides quality healthcare for people that they can afford, about an education system that makes us competitive on a global basis, about security. All of those things become the important things that we have to be able to focus on as a government. And I want to add one more thing. I hear in the House, and I also hear whispers outside about United Workers' Party and what appears to be a division within the United Workers' Party. I want to say to everyone, the United Workers' Party lost the election. Immediately after the election and before you have your next convention, there's going to be thoughts, people going to think that they are deserving of leadership. Other people, leadership is not just the political leader, not just the chairman of the party. Okay? It's chairman of constituency branches, being on executive constituency branches. There are all kinds of people who give all kinds of theories as to why they think the party lost. Okay? And that they can do better. Is that unique to United Workers' Party? Is that unique to St. Lucia? Is that unique to politics in general? No. And so all the things here, I remember when I was running for political leader, I was going to lose and everybody was in a frenzy about, and everybody had a theory. That's great, because that tells you that people are interested in the United Workers' Party. The party is going to go through an internal process of adjustment. Every single person in this party has the democratic right. The difference with Alan Shastner and what I stand for is that right cannot be at the expense of the reputation of the party. And we have a process in which we will select the leadership of our party. And let us confine ourselves to that process. But sadly, that doesn't happen in my party, that doesn't happen in any political party, and that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. So I'm asking for the people of St. Lucia not to be disheartened. United Workers' Party and its members are united in one position, one big position, that this government that we have now is going to fail. And that more and more people are seeing the success of the initiatives that we had and the need to return back to good governance. What we may disagree on is who that person is. And there'll be a process to make that choice, in which hopefully the majority of the people in the party, in a very democratic way, will make that choice. And I embrace that. I also want to say, whether I win or I lose, it's the same. I am committed to United Workers' Party. And as long as the party continues to share those values, things that I can embrace, that I know that it's not about just winning the election, but it's about once you get in, what you're going to do with that. And are committed to excellence, committed to really moving the needle with St. Lucia, I will fully support anyone. That's not to say I have given up. That's not to say that I don't want to be the leader. Please don't misunderstand me. But there's no way I'm going to use my influence in the party to prevent anyone from expressing their opinion, anyone wanting to be in a position of leadership. And if in fact I win and they don't, I fully embrace them, and I would hope that if I won, that they would fully embrace me. But the party is going through an internal discussion. There are different groups in the party. And the Labour Party is going to use this to their advantage, to try to say that there's a division within the party. But please, this is a great party. Very proud of all the persons that make up this party. So at this point, I'd like to open up for questions. I think that's a question you're going to have to ask Ezekiel. I've certainly been at meetings in which I've asked him that question. He has not said he is, but he's also not said he's not. Okay? Do I think that Ezekiel wants to see some changes in the party? I do. I think there are a lot of people who share that opinion. But I don't think that we should read. Ezekiel is a person I have a great regard for. I put a lot of my success as leader of the party on Ezekiel and the relationship, and it continued. And as I said to people, my issue is about mutual respect. That's really what I'm more interested in. But I have heard that him, among other persons, are interested in leadership. But I've also heard more that there is a very heated discussion about the chairmanship of the party. And I think that that's no secret to anyone. Now, the chairman plays a very important role. He's the soul of the party, right? I mean, this is the person who's your commander-in-chief on the ground and really sets the pace for the party. And so I think that is really what this convention more than likely is going to be about. I don't personally think that there is going to be a big move on leadership, but you never know. And I certainly in no way have asked for there to be any exclusivity in political leadership. If the party believes that right now is the time to make a change, I embrace that. But I certainly have not heard that as yet. That's his right. You know, Ozzy's my brother, right? Ozzy, not only in politics, but in the family life. I grew up with Ozzy. And he started his working with my father from the time I was like 15 or 16 years of age. And Ozzy and I don't always agree on things, but I still respect him in my personal life. But that's he entitled to. And certainly he can go out and express whatever opinion he wants. I think that there's a process to express those opinions. And some of the things I've heard I don't personally like, but I put that up. That's in the arena of politics. That's what it is. So again, I have nothing derogatory to say about Oswald Auguste. He's my brother. I admire his success as a business person. I think that he's made significant contributions to the development of our party, put in a lot of work, and he's entitled to his opinion. And he's going to need to express those opinions and convince other people that his position is right. I will. So I've provided to the Speaker of the House already a letter from the Auditor General indicating that the account existed, indicating that no permission was sought to open up the account, indicating that £66,500 was placed into the account, and that monies were dispersed from that account to some of the staff members. I've also provided him with letters from the Accountant General and from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs indicating that the account doesn't exist. Or the account exists, but no permission was sought. And I also have copies of the opening of the account, and that the account was in the name of Ernest Hilaire as High Commissioner, and that the co-signature on it was Tufali as the ambassador. And I will provide the remaining documents will be early next week, but certainly I could make the other documents and circulate. No, we're having a meeting I think today. I'm hoping that one of the things that we do as a party is we create what's called a convention team, meaning a team that focuses on the establishment. I'm hoping that we agree on making that happen today, meaning we take the decision to have a convention team, and I think it's probably going to take a couple of more weeks to establish who those persons are going to be. I would like to think, and I'm hoping that the convention will be before the end of the year. So the report's been submitted to me, and I want to say to you that there's several reports. So there was a report that was done internally. So it means that a team went around and met with all the constituency branches and individual people. There's a poll, a national poll, right? And then there are the persons who participated in the elections. Two of those reports have been given to me already, and I'm waiting for the new executives to come in to be able to share that with the new chairman to determine how it is. Now, just because we've done it doesn't mean that this is going to be a document that's going to be widely circulated, right? But I want to say too that it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out what happened. And I want to repeat myself. The Labour Party won by a large margin when it comes to parliamentary seats. 13, or if you want to say 50. And it's easier to say 50. We all know now it's 50. But they got 51% of the popular vote. And only 51% of the people voted. You have. So that means that only 26% of the people who are eligible of voting voted for the Labour Party. Next thing, they won by 6,000 votes. 6,000 votes in the political history of St. Lucia is not a massive margin. It's not a small margin. It's not the smallest margin, but it's what on average it is. Now, if you take the 6,000 votes and understand that Philip Pierre won by 1,800, Bebe won by 2,000, and Kenny Anthony won by 1,700. We're talking about almost 5,400 votes of the 6,000 was in 3 seats. So 10 seats were won by 600 votes. So the fact that you only had a 51% voter turnout and only 51% of the people voted for Labour tells me that Labour succeeded in doing what they were supposed to do. They mobilized their base and they got their people to do it. The same cannot be said of United Workers' Party. The level of mobilization that we had in 2016 is not comparable. Now, is it COVID? Was it the ability of I call it chewing gum and walking at the same time? Meaning being in government and still trying to participate in the political arena. So the reality is that the party is very relevant. The party, I think, that needs to tinker with some of its stuff. And we've had that internal discussion about what those things are and start preparing itself for the next general election. And the reality is that general election, the way that things are going right now, might be sooner than we think. I told you. The United Workers' Party lost the election because we lacked conviction. Okay? Now, you can put and point to contributing factors. But the reality of any successful political party is to understand what your weaknesses are and overcome them. And the fact is we were focused in many ways on some of the wrong things. The propaganda of the Labour Party, sadly, infiltrated the party way more than it should have. The fact that Steve would have defected tells you that they had this defection, this division within the party had stayed. Steve didn't stay quietly inside the party. As he says, he suffered in his constituency branch was continuously antagonistic to the party. And they were members of the party, they would have to be, that were still sympathetic to that kind of regime. And the party did not do enough to overcome those things. The party and some members of the party, when they're faced with this kind of dilemma, choose not to go out and vote. And what's sad about the whole thing is that when you look at the success of our programs, we built more roads, water projects, airport projects, housing projects, sporting projects, healthcare, security, pushing the envelope on all things. I mean, you know how proud I am that in the 2021 Social and Economic Review, the St. Lucia grew by 12.5%. It tells you that the policies we had during COVID and what we were coming out were successful. The closest country to growth in the Caribbean, other than Ghana, because Ghana never shut down, right? And they had all this oil that they discovered. The closest country was Dominica at 6%. Antigua was at 5%. Barbados was at 1.4%. And the reality, the strategy of opening up our doors, getting tourists in here, combined with construction, is what drove that growth. And now you're seeing the reverse. You're not seeing the emphasis on tourism. All the projects are being stopped. And more importantly, the projects that are continuing with the worst economic disaster in this country. CIE. I love Renault. But from an economic perspective, His company is vertically integrated. His sand, his quarry, his trucks, his cement, his block. They know it is for you as the Minister of Finance, it's for you as the Prime Minister, it's for you as the Cabinet to make the final determination on what's going to make sense. How can you tell me that this is ridiculous? And then you want to come out and say, oh, by the government lowering the VAT rate, the government of St. Lucia lost $250 million of revenue. Where is the proof of that? When we lowered the VAT rate, revenue for government went up. Unemployment went down. Non-performing loans reduced. And the economy grew. So the only way mathematically that you can lower the rate of VAT and for government to increase its revenue is because there was more activity. So how can you come and say that nonsense? Who can take a person on that says that? And even if he was right, it's an important philosophical question. Is the money, $250, better in the hands of government, or is it better in the hands of... Where is that money better? So the money didn't disappear? So there's two ways of answering that question. The first one is no. Okay? We can't see anything that they're doing to help the people of St. Lucia. The second way to answer that question is when they were in opposition and we had COVID, in which the thing is it was, is it 4%? And when you break that on a monthly basis, I think we're talking about, I don't even think it was $10. Ask me the question, the electricity bill is almost doubled, bus fares have gone up, the cost of sugar and flour and everything else is going up. Is the $4 enough to compensate for all those things? I mean, so I think the average solution can answer that question for themselves. Again, this is just nonsense. When you put in that the increase in the wages to the civil servants is one of your successes, really? That had been, and in the absence of agreeing to waive getting money and taking it on credit, instead they agreed that they would delay the negotiated increases. So that had already been done. A big feat that you paid for it. So again, this is a government that came in and said the country was broke, there was no money, the coffers were empty. Really? But when they got the social and economic revenue, the government had returned to where it was in 2019. Was being done through the process. There's a process. That's what I'm saying to you. The special. So if everyone was doing their job, this would have come to a much speedier conclusion. You have to ask the question: why did successive controls of customs, what Chico did, why was that not done earlier. So if you go back in time, the first acting controller of customs, Roddy Al-Sidra. Roddy never declared that he was the person who gave the pre-delivery. So he should have recluded himself from the investigation. There were allegations yesterday that I moved Anita Montoute. Absolutely not. No, my grandfather was a controller of customs. My father was in shipping, so we dealt a lot with controller of customs. Controllers of customs have an immense amount of power and authority. But I was at pains to say to successive controller of customs as the Minister of Finance, nothing else, to say that the discretionary decision that you think that you have on this issue is not there. Because the moment the Director of Finance wrote you and asked you a simple question, who owns the car? And that for any controller of customs, even the one today, to say that the decision, in the court case, the decision to withdraw the case is he's satisfied that the commercial invoice that has the St. Lucia High Commission's name on it is sufficient. But he's forgetting. Before he came in, there was a whole investigation to show that the reason why it was in the name of the High Commission was to avoid paying taxes, and that he did not have permission of the state's authority to do so. So once you know that, then what you must ask him for is the document that shows that he had permission to purchase the car in the High Commission's name. And why is that relevant? It's relevant because when he returned as an ambassador, he's entitled to bring the car in duty-free into St. Lucia. That's what he's entitled to. So was he a returning ambassador? The answer is yes. But the benefit of the duty-free car is not transferable to anyone. It must be in his name. And the exceptions that customs makes in terms of the documents they use is only for second-hand cars. This is a new car. How can a person tell you they can't get the commercial invoice? And eventually when he said, okay, well, here's the commercial invoice and it has this, you can't explain how the St. Lucia High Commission's name on it. And that is why we've challenged the decision of the Controller of Customs. So we're asking for a judicial review. Because he must explain to everyone why he withdrew the case. And it brings up an interesting point. Because Customs was not the one prosecuting the case. The entity prosecuting the case is the DPP. And in order to get the DPP to convince the case, I cannot instruct him to do that. The Prime Minister and no other government official has any authority over the DPP. Customs has to present the evidence to the DPP. And the DPP must say, I'm going to take this case on. And it was the DPP's office that amended the charge. So in fact, the case against Ernest, they didn't make any allegations of fraud. Was continuing to give him the benefit of the doubt. The DPP's case was simply compelling him to come to the court and provide the documentation that Customs was requesting. Now, if in fact at that point he cannot, it means that the declaration that he made is false, and that's a criminal charge. It then also begs an investigation into the fact is, who gave him permission? Did he abuse his office? It then begs another question. If in fact he received the car illegally, meaning through fraud, and he transfers the car to St. Lucia, that becomes money laundering. But you don't get there until you cross the first hurdle. And because he was a politician, I believe the state was giving him every single opportunity to clarify the matter. And I think it's insulting and it's disgraceful on his part that after he did what he did, and all the evidence is there to show it, that he would want to blame anybody else. Those are decisions he made. And remember, when the car came in to St. Lucia, it was December 2015. They didn't lose the election until June of 2016. He had 6 months to perfect his entry. How is it that the Ministry of Transportation registered the vehicle and the entry was not perfected? These are important questions, and I know that there are lots of investigation and all the evidence is there, and that's why I'm saying, if the government legitimately wants to say it's against corruption, it has to start with everyone. Not necessarily, because, again, you say it's in every ministry. So a fraud may cross ministries, and one person doesn't know, right? So people are bureaucratically putting checks and balances more in terms of accounts and everything else, but nobody's really got a system in place to deal with fraud. Now, how the fraud comes about is if you see something suspicious, right? So you're asked to do an inventory, documents show up that there is a car that's in the name of the High Commission, the car is not there, that triggers off an investigation. Who does it go to? That's why I say it went to the CAPSEC. Why? Because administratively, all the ministries of foreign affairs, the ambassadors, report to the CAPSEC. The CAPSEC then, realizing that this is an issue because it's a state asset, belongs to the Ministry of Finance. So the Ministry of Finance gets the letter, does its own investigation, confirms the car was never registered as part of their assets. I'm only using this as an example, and how the whole thing is then triggered. Customs now is then alerted. Customs plays a role. Customs is the point of entry. They're the ones who have the documentation to determine whether the car belonged to Ernest or not. That's where the authority lies. Now, when persons deliberately want to prevent the investigations from taking place for whatever reason, maybe there are legitimate reasons, this is where you need a separate entity. And this is why I said in the House yesterday that what we're lacking is investigation. Once there is a trigger or a need for an investigation, Ram Shohoid report, Rashamel, okay, we had to go outside years later. The Auditor General does not have enough resources to do all the audits that they ought to be doing, or to the level of detail they ought to be doing. So I believe that there is a case, and I'm saying integrate this into your Integrity Commission. So the Integrity Commission, sadly, is paperwork. There's one officer. Now, the Integrity Commission should be working with FIA and should be working with different government ministries to help in terms of their research, Inland Revenue, etc. And they have the authority to do that. But the reality is that unless there is a singular driving force, and so I agree with the establishment of a special prosecutor, but if you're going to call it a special prosecutor, let's go the way of Jamaica. Let's make it fully integrated, fully independent, and let's not replicate or undermine the authorities that already exist. Your question your question contains the answer. That the government, my government, understood the plight, and for the first 2 years was paying the fees. $350 for the license. We're paying for everybody. That means that no parent had to go out and buy any books. And why did we do it? To help with the transition. So it means if parents wanted to go out and buy the books, and there were students who would learn better with the books, they could go in free to do that. But for the kids and the parents who cannot afford it, we're giving them the EPAD, no money. We set up a maintenance system, a team to be able to repair, be able to replace up to 1 EPAD per child for the 5 years. And more importantly, it was a platform that was to be broadened. What was that platform? We complain that we sit these exams, these entrance exams, and kids want to go to St. Mary's or St. Joseph's or Hess. Everybody has their favorite schools because they think that the teaching is better there. We were going to create a platform where we were going to evaluate the teachers at every level. The best biology teacher in Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4. The best physics teacher, the best math teacher, the best English teacher, the best history teacher, and film them. All the chapters. And that's online. So if I'm a student and I didn't really understand what my teacher said in the class, I can go online and get what's perceived to be the best teacher to do it. And I can do it at my own pace. Like I was horrible at sitting in class, paying attention, right? And I couldn't imagine how beneficial that tool would be. And sometimes you have to hear a terminology or a concept a couple of times. And it's your own pace because the technology allows you to do that, right? The parent now has access to the class. So sometimes my student, I don't know if other parents are suffering from the same thing today. Like my daughter comes and asks me about some mathematical thing or some science thing. I can't remember the last time I remember studying that. Imagine I would now have the ability to go and listen to the chapter as an adult, okay, understand what it is, and help my child. That's where we were taking the education system in this country. So I mean, it is again absurd, ridiculous, farcical that a government would want to come and say that that was a bad system. And it's sad that many solutions are now having to understand what we were saying. The teachers were told that this was bad news. I had the opportunity the other day to sit down with 6 teachers. They said, only now I'm understanding where you were going. Because as a tool for a teacher, phenomenal. It tells you how long a child has spent reading a chapter, whether they in fact did their homework. It aids them. A child can go home. You can connect with that child at home, and there's a whiteboard option on it where the teacher can explain everything. All of those are kept as standard records. So as a parent, if you want to know what has been happening between the teacher and your student, she can show you. And guess what? We're now putting a tool in the hands of students that becomes a tool of life. You're going to give people a laptop that has no controls on it. They can go back and go on the web, and all the storage space is going to be used for games. And that's the good part, the games. This other one doesn't allow you to do that. All the links to the internet are embedded in the computer. So when you go to a chapter and it makes a reference, you can click on it and it takes you to where the research is. It's a learning tool. Young girls in my constituency who are carrying these big bags. Sometimes the bags are bigger than they are. Right? All of that is gone. And yet a government was elected on the premise that this was a bad idea. Well, I'm hoping that the government brought them home. They retired from a long trip, and that there's going to be another opportunity for people to come out and celebrate. Right? So, look, I think that I'm never going to see anything negative as it surrounds our athletes. I believe that sports is a huge development tool. Remember, I'm on record. If we want to fight crime, we must give our young people a reason to. So your question is very appropriate. One of the things we can do is to make sure they're celebrated as heroes. Kids love that level of recognition. I said that the success of the aquatic center, but the success of the aquatic center is boom, it's the parents, it's the coaches. So I want to celebrate the coaches who, under the most extraordinary circumstances, very little support, persevered. Students who, I remember in Soufrière, the training was in Choiseul. You know what the public transportation system is like between Choiseul and Soufrière? Try horrible. Do you know the dedication on a daily basis, your weekends? And weekend transportation between Choiseul and Soufrière is even worse on the weekends. That's the level of commitment. And what my government was attempting to do was to create zones in our country create clubs, and that the clubs, to qualify as a national club, had to have at least 4 disciplines and had to have 2 arts focuses. So that when you join a club, these months is football, these months is cricket, these months is track and field, okay? And it's at the primary level, a secondary level, and senior level. Friday nights, secondary games. Saturdays, secondary games and primary games. Sunday would be senior games. So look at my constituency in Deriso. They're fixing up the football field. It's not about just sports, the economic activity that creates a spin-off. Right? So it was to now show samples of different fields that we can put in that now can support zones. So in Blasha and in Deriso and in Angia, you want to have at least 3 or 4 clubs, primary level, secondary level, and senior level, that are using the football field, the singular football field, like they do with the aquatic center. The goal was to put a pool in the Miko Secondary School, that again, that the community can come and have 4 or 5 clubs that are using those things. And it's the same clubs, they're just providing different options of disciplines. You never know what sport a child is going to excel at. I've also said, and I've been criticized, I get it, but let's have that conversation. We're not big enough to have every discipline. I saw the high diving. Can we imagine if we're going to have high diving in St. Lucia right now? Right? So the question becomes, that sports is a tool for development. Sports is a tool for development. And that part of that development is that sports provides discipline, it provides competitiveness, all the values that you want to see, sportsmanship. But it's competition that creates success. So what do we want from our sports? We want a sport, first of all, it must be gender neutral, boys and girls. We want it that the kids have the greatest opportunity to get scholarships. And we want to know that there is a lot of professional leagues for those who make it that far. The number 1 sport is football. Girls, tons of scholarships and lots of professional leagues. But if you're going to do football, you might as well do track. Because once you build a football field, build your track. Then you have basketball, you have swimming, you have volleyball, you have tennis, you have a whole bunch of sports. Pick them. Which ones you're going to do. Table tennis. And let us become best in class in those disciplines. Let's be known. You see, like Jamaica right now with athletics, can we be that in football? I think we have the talent to do that. And as I said, Julian Alfred is an extraordinary person because she was so focused. She was so confident in many ways. And did what it was to succeed. And Jamaica was the best, and she was given that opportunity. She jumped on it. We just now have the academy. Take the kids who are showing the success or ability at a younger age, put them in an environment for them to succeed. Can't develop world-class athletes in our education system. And our after-school program is too weak. And that's what we were trying to build upon. And that's what I'm saying to you, have to have a full plan of where you're going to go. It's not going to happen overnight. But we know the things that make and produce success. And we need to provide sporting opportunities, artistic opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities, skill opportunities for our young people, and show them a pathway to success in which any drug lord that comes to them, they say, boss, that's okay. Look, the Labour Party continuously shows that they're not up to scratch. And when they don't have a reasonable answer as to why something is happening, they want to pass the blame on to somebody. Right? So let's not get past the fact. Okay? They failed in their ability to get sugar in this country. A simple task. Okay? The sugar issue of over-consuming sugar from a diabetes perspective, health perspective, has been there forever. Right? And we talk about alternatives to that. But they're just looking for excuses. Every day it's another excuse. It's somebody else's fault. We inherited this. Right, so you talk about Sabasha, the hotel. It's now popular to say, we did it. So when the minister was there talking about that they left it in 2016, and they came back and they're the ones who had to resurrect. I mean, again, nonsense. The project that he left was with a Bulgarian company that was going to use Fairmont as the brand, and it was a small hotel. That company continuously had problems, particularly going through the blacklisting, of getting a bank account opened. And at least they were nice enough to find a new developer. The new developer came in, again another Bulgarian company, great guys, who have several hotels in Bulgaria and in Europe, and decided not to go with Fairmont, but to go now with a Hyatt hotel. And then not to make it a boutique hotel, but to make it a conference hotel. Sugar Beach has expanded its conference facilities, and with its proximity to the airport. And because now of the larger hotel, the road became an issue, and there were more people who had to be reallocated. So look, I welcome the idea that there's continuity. Let's stop this one-up measure. It's like when the members on the other said, "Oh, you've never built a hotel." I mean, who do they really believe they're going to convince? Right? My experience in the hotel industry was back to Windjammer Landing. You don't see me here boasting about the fact that the person who brought sandals to St. Lucia was Alan Chasson. The persons who identified Wyndham to come in as the management contract. And the success we've had all along. Not only have I caused hotels to be built, I'm very proud of the fact that I built a hotel myself. How many of them can say that? Okay. Harbor Club. And remember, when I was involved with Harbor Club, I was in opposition. I wasn't on the bandwagon trying to convince investors not to come to St. Lucia because it would be politically beneficial to me. So you can't be speaking on both sides of your mouth. Now these are things I've not said in the past. These are things I try to stay away from. I try to remain very positive. But sadly, when I meet people and they tell me, "Boy, boss, I didn't know you didn't bring a hotel into the country," because people believe this nonsense, and you think that all the evidence is there for this otherwise. The greatest growth we had in hotels, I give them some benefit, was during World Cup and the levels of incentives, and the world was in tune with that. Let's take, what's the name of that famous, the solution up north? Royalton. Is Royalton? Royalton came in because the hotel that was existing, they went bankrupt. Club St. Lucia. And the Bank of St. Lucia lost over $40 million in depositors' money. The government of St. Lucia had to write off millions of dollars on NIC and taxes. But that's a sense of timing. What we were doing was creating the environment to get more locals involved in tourism, to grow the Airbnb through village tourism. You want to go and change the name to community tourism? I couldn't care. That's your prerogative. But the concept and the principle remains the same, but that's what I'm saying to you. They've already deviated from that. The tea village concepts. You talk about a youth economy. That's what it is. Put it on the ground. Create the business opportunity for these people to excel. So village tourism was about fixing up the villages and creating an environment in which Airbnb works. All the people in Saltobus who have Airbnbs, now it's growing. Park Estates. All the people up in Grand Riviere and all these places that roads were not there. People say, "Oh, you can't eat roads." As a friend of mine said to me, "Tell them you need roads to eat." Okay? But when we allow politicians to get in there, and guess what? It is feeding your base. That's the oldest trick in the books. But at some point, even your base will become disgusted with you because it's just words. Right? You're in government. It's your decision how much you want to charge for the passport. Times have changed. There was a recession. Cost of living has gone up. It's for you to make that decision. Don't come and blame the rich. Whenever it's something that's very difficult, you blame the other government. When you think it's going to be something that's great, you celebrate it as yours. But the reality is, after 1 year, I end how I began. And exactly what Dominic said. You have a government that is visionless. There's no plan, guys. It's a government that the objective was to get into government at all costs. To accommodate people in your party that should not even be near politics. And you hear politicians and ministers speaking who have no moral authority to speak on these things. I mean, it's insane. You take a man who was involved in a church incident and you make him the minister of ecclesiastical affairs. I mean, I must be the only person who's not seeing that. And then you want to understand about the moral decay in your economy because the people who are supposed to be providing that leadership in our country aren't able to do so. They can't speak with that moral authority. So, United Workers' Party stands ready. We will go through all of the discussions and the internal wrangling that we have to go through to come out as a stronger and better political party. And we're going to do it with a great sense of urgency because we're even more concerned after what we've seen for the first year as to where we're going to go. You know, there's a minister there, a good friend of mine. He was trying to argue about the amount of debt that was accumulated in our tenure in office. And I was showing him, I said, okay, well, one of the greatest reflections of debt is interest payments. In 2003, I want the people of Flint to appreciate this. The total interest payments was $44 million a year. By 2016, it was $170 million. Okay? Between 2011 and 2016, the Labour Party borrowed more than $1 billion. And interest payments increased by $80 million a year. In 2016 to 2019, just before COVID, we borrowed $300 million, and the interest payments had moved by $3 million. And by the time we borrowed $600 million, 2020 and 2021, $600 million, interest payments went up by another $6 million. Why? Because it was concessionary financing. 0.5% interest, no principal, 40-year repayment terms. How can you even begin to compare or make that an issue? We have a government that brought unemployment rate from 25% to 16%. Those are facts that cannot be disputed. So you're telling me you inherited a country that was morally destroyed, economically distressed? Really? Where? How? The fact is, in less than 1 year, that's what you've done. Crime was on the increase, only in murders. We've done an amazing job in reducing burglaries and assaults and giving confidence to the police and empowering our police. Every time there's a problem, the first person they want to blame is the policeman. So, I'm proud of what we have done. I think that there's a lot more work for us to do. We're not angered. They keep on saying how I'm angry about being in opposition. I'm not. I've accepted the role. That's part of the process. This is part of our journey. It's not a final destination by itself. But we will fight for those things that we believe in. And the fundamental differences between the Labour Party and the United Workers' Party are becoming more and more apparent every single day. Every day. And hopefully many more solutions jump on the bandwagon, and that we want to start the process of rebuilding St. Lucia, about making it the best in the region and making our destination world class.
Well, there you have it, our political leader, Honorable Alan Chasney, the MP for the constituency of Micoud South, and also the leader of the opposition in the lower house, the House of Assembly, addressing many issues here today, issues of corruption, issues of crime, issues of the high cost of living, and the failure of this administration to address the many concerns of you, the citizens in this country, we bring this press conference to an end, and we thank you so very much for tuning in and being part of what it is. History has taught us that to every dark night there is an end, and we want to encourage you, the people of St. Lucia, to hold strong, hold tight. We will overcome this. It will be not much longer where you will have a chance to get rid of this incompetent, this vindictive, and this uncaring administration. We thank you for joining us. God bless you all. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.